Alright guys, welcome back to Underground Science, and in this video we'll be looking at one of the layers of the adrenal cortex, and in specific it's going to be the zona glomerulosa of the adrenal cortex, and we're going to be talking about how the basic overview of how we produce aldosterone. Right, it's a very important cholesterol-driven hormone that acts especially in the kidneys to increase blood pressure. All right, and blood volume. So let's go and get started. All right, so over here you can see that where it's located. So we have our kidneys, right here, and on top of our kidneys sits our glands, our adrenal glands. So this is our adrenal gland. Adrenal gland. All right, and in this adrenal gland we have an adrenal cortex, which is made up of several layers, which we'll discuss in the future videos. And then in the middle, we have some nerve tissue, right? In particular, chromatin cells that we'll discuss in a future video called the adrenal medulla. So let me just go and say that our adrenal gland is made up of an adrenal cortex, right? Which is made up of several layers. And we have our adrenal medulla, which is mainly responsible for norepinephrine and epinephrine secretion, right? So adrenal medulla. All right, so in this video, we're going to be talking about the first layer of the adrenal cortex called the zona glomerulosa, right? So again, our adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. So let's go and get started. So here we have just a cutout section of the cell membrane of a zona glomerulosa cell. All right, and in here we're going to see things things like a G protein coupled receptor, intracellular pathways that actually trigger the catalyzation reactions to create aldosterone. All right, so if you haven't already, make sure to go and watch my PIP2 and DAG and IP3 G stimulatory protein also, right? I made all those pathway videos so that this video will make more sense. All right, so let's go and get started. So this is one of our zona glomerulosa cells, and here we'll see that we have a G protein coupled receptor here, right? So let me go and draw that. We have a G protein coupled receptor where we receive a ligand or a first messenger, right, on the outside of the membrane on this receptor. And the reason why it's called a G protein coupled receptor is because we have a G protein coupled with this receptor. All right, so let's go and write the G protein down. So the first G protein we'll talk about is the GQ protein. All right, in particular GQ alpha protein. And so let me go draw this G protein coupled receptor a little bigger because we also have a beta and a gamma group. So we have a beta protein group and a gamma protein group. All right, that's bound on this G protein coupled receptor. And what's going to happen is that this one, I'm just going to discuss the basic overview, right? I'm not going to go into the detailed version like we did in the PIP2 and the DAG and IP3 video. What's going to happen is that first we have to talk about our brain. All right, so in our hypothalamus, we have certain nuclei, just a bunch of central nervous system cell bodies that project their axons out as neurons, and these neurons actually synthesize and release a hormone called corticotropin releasing hormone. All right, so let's say we're in our brain, and so let's go and write down our hypothalamus. All right, so let's go and write this down first, and then we'll talk about our first trigger. All right, so on our zona glomerulosa cell membrane. So our hypothalamus has a nuclei, or many nuclei, it's going to be actually called the paraventricular nucleus. All right, so in our hypothalamus, we have our paraventricular nucleus. And our paraventricular nucleus is just a bunch of cell bodies, right? These are cell bodies of neurons that will actually project their axons out And it turns out they're going to release a hormone called corticotropin. So corticotropin, hopefully I spell this right, corticotropin releasing hormone. All right, so corticotropin releasing hormone. Then what happens is that this corticotropin releasing hormone that was released by the paraventricular nucleus has to go to the anterior pituitary gland. All right, has to go to the anterior pituitary gland. But it can't just go there, all right? It needs some blood portal system. And so it travels through what's called the hypophyseal portal system, which connects, it's a blood portal system that connects the hypothalamus, right? So it connects the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. All right, so the corticotropin releasing hormone travels through, I'm just going to write it here, through the hypophyseal, hopefully I spelled that right, portal system. All right, so the hypophyseal portal system. Okay, so once the corticotropin releasing hormone reaches the anterior pituitary gland, in the anterior pituitary gland we have a structure called, we have many structures, right, called corticotropes. So let's just go and see one corticotrope here that's in the anterior pituitary gland. So let's go and draw it. So we said we have a corticotrope here, right? So let's just say it looks like something like this, right? And we have a corticotrope here, and on the corticotrope, it turns out we have a receptor. That receptor is for our friend corticotropic releasing hormone. So once it gets to the anterior pituitary, it's going to find this corticotrope, and the corticotropic releasing hormone, let's just indicate as a green dot, is going to bind on the corticotrope receptor. All right, so let's go and label this as the corticotrope. All right, once this corticotropin releasing hormone binds to the corticotrope, right, so once this corticotropin releasing hormone binds to the corticotrope is going to then release a hormone called adrenal corticotropic hormone. All right, so once it binds, it's going to release a hormone called adrenal corticotropic hormone. All right, so adrenal corticotropic, hopefully I'm spelling this right, hormone. Right, so let's go and double check, hopefully if I spell this right, adrenal corticotropic hormone, yeah. And for the rest of this video, let's go and label, we'll refer to as ACTH, because that's how it's abbreviated. All right, now this adrenocorticotropic hormone can then enter, our blood capillaries in our brain and go to our kidney cells, in particular our zona glomerulosa cells. So in particular to our zona glomerulosa cells. And here, remember, this is our first layer of our adrenal cortex. And here is where the ACTH will actually act on. All right. But first, we're going to talk about what happens when angiotensin, or you know what? Let's just talk about this since we've already talked about adrenocorticotropic hormone. So then let's go back up here and let's go and talk about what happens when adrenocorticotropic hormone binds, all right, to this G protein receptor, G protein coupled receptor. So let me go and erase this. We'll talk about this later. Right now, let's talk about what happens when adrenocorticotropic hormone binds, all right, to this zona glomerulosa cell as a first messenger. All right, so it came here to the zona glomerulosa cell membrane, and it has now binded to the G stimulatory coupled receptor. So when ACTH binds, it's going to bind and it's going to initiate a G stimulatory reaction. All right, so what we discussed in our G stimulatory protein intracellular mechanism video. So we're going to have a G stimulatory protein it's going to be bound to, I should say, the G protein coupled receptor. Once ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone binds to the G protein coupled receptor, the G stimulatory protein initially will have GDP bound to it, but once it binds, GDP will convert to GTP. So GTP will then now be bound to the G stimulatory coupled receptor. Once GTP is now bound to it, it's going to free the G-stimulatory protein, give it some energy, and the G-stimulatory protein is going to travel some X amount of distance near itself, and it's going to find this amazing enzyme, this amazing effector enzyme that's present on the cell membrane, right? So I don't know why I'm drawing it like this, but it's just a random shape of a protein, and this enzyme is going to be called adenylate cyclase. All right. Adenylate cyclase will see this G-stimulatory protein, right? So the G-stimulatory protein will actually bind here onto it, which still has its GTP. Once a G-stimulatory binds, it activates adenylate cyclase. So the binding action of G-stimulatory protein, remember, will activate adenylate cyclase. Again, we're not going to go into the major details. We're just going to stick to here because we don't want this video to be too long, right? So it's going to bind to adenylate cyclase, activating it. And then we have other mechanisms that happen, which if you want to know, just go and check out my video on this that we made just separately on the G-stimulatory protein pathway. What's going to happen eventually is that adenylate cyclase is going to eventually activate some other enzymes, right? Or it's going to play a role in catalyzing some other reactions. And eventually, what's going to happen is we're going to have the activation of protein kinase A, eventually, all right? Now, protein kinase A will play a big role in regulating the steps, the catalyzation steps, along with other enzymes that will lead to aldosterone production, all right? But our adrenocorticotropic hormone doesn't have as much as an effect as another molecule, another first messenger that we'll see in the next video. So we have the production of protein kinase A, and we'll see this in a future video of how it all comes together and helps form aldosterone. So that's it for now. Let's just go ahead and end this video and talk about another stimulus that's way stronger than adrenocorticotropic hormone. It's going to be angiotensin II, all right? And we'll talk about what pathway that has inside the cell, inside the zona glomerulosa cell. It's not a G-stimulatory pathway. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that in the next video. Hope you guys enjoy this video, and can't wait to see you guys in my next video. Hit that notification bell, like and subscribe. See you guys later, and stay safe.